I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello everyone, it's Antonio, host of the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast, and here we are at the end of 2024, and we are recapping some of my favorite conversations of the show. And it was difficult. It was difficult to figure out which conversations I wanted to feature on this episode because I had so many great guests, so many great conversations, but at the end of the day, I picked the ones that I either got the biggest laugh out of or things where I really learned about myself as a podcaster, and also having a chance to speak to some amazing people in the industry like Diane Franklin and Alan Rudolph. So that is what you're going to hear. I'll go through that list in just a second. Kicking off 2025, I'll have my friend Jesse Rowe, who is the lead programmer at Brewvie Cinema Pub here in Salt Lake City. It's our repertory theater / brew pub, and he brings a lot of great films to that theater. But we also just love to share the discoveries that we've had. So we're going to have our discovery episode for 2024, films that we saw for the first time, not necessarily films that came out in 2024. We each brought 5 to the table, and they're all very different, and they're all very fun, and for the most part, they're available to see either on streaming or physical media. So once you listen to that episode, have fun going back and checking those films out and letting us know what you thought about our 2024 discoveries. So what are we going to hear today in this recap? So we're going to go in the following order. Remember, this was the first year that we did video on the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast, so all of these guests were able to be on my YouTube channel on video. You could see their beautiful faces, you could see my beautiful face, and it just really brings a lot more to the conversation. But you can still find the audio version on your regular streaming platforms. So first of all, we kick off with Chris and Elle of Spoil My Movie. We had a conversation about Demolition Man, and we finished that conversation off with a game. We decided that we were going to pick a punk band name based off of our favorite lines of dialogue from Demolition Man. After that, I have my good friend Dan from Casting Views on the show, where we discussed doom-mongering in entertainment, music, TV, movies, and streaming, and TikToks, social media. There's been an ever-present sense of doom-mongering, whether it is ecological or political or sociological. For some reason, we feel like people are telling us the end of the world is coming. And that's what our conversation was about, is how that's being represented in our media and entertainment. After that, I had my good friend Leo of Movies on Weed. We discussed this film Zoot Suit, which is a film about Chicanos in the 1940s, the Sleepy Lagoon murders, and how we thought the film was relevant for when it came out, but how it's even more relevant today in the terms of the sociological climate of Latino versus Anglo-Saxon in Los Angeles. After that, I had my good friends Nicole and Tessa from the Doom generation on the show, where we had a good laugh about the film Millie Willie, starring Pamela Adlon and John Glover. And it's about a girl who wakes up one morning with a penis after going through a Native American ritual where her deepest, darkest desire would come through. So hear us talk about that one. After that, my good friend John and Roy of Yours, Mine, and Theirs podcast, we had an episode dedicated to kids in danger films. And my favorite conversation of that episode was our discussion of Cloris Leachman's witch character in the Canon Films version of Hansel and Gretel. After that, I had my friend Craig McNeil of the Craig and Friends podcast on, where we discussed Ken Russell movies, specifically his biopic of Rudolph Valentino from the early 80s. I had that amazing opportunity to speak to Diane Franklin, star of Last American Virgin, Better Off Dead, and of course Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. But we talked about the films that were in between those and how I think that she has probably the most iconic grin in cinema history. Now, next after that is one of my favorite conversations of the year. I had the opportunity to talk to my hero, Alan Rudolph, about his film Breakfast of Champions, and I was able to sneak a couple questions in there about my favorite film of his, Trouble in Mind, starring Chris Christopherson. But we talked about what Breakfast of Champions meant back when it was written as a novel, what it represented in the late 90s when he made it as a film, and what I think it represents now in today's weird climate where we feel like there's less success-driven individuals and more clout-driven individuals. So that was an interesting conversation as well. And I'm going to finish off this episode with my most recent conversation with the Reverend Scott of the Church of Tarantino podcast, where we did the 12 Days of Quentin. We gifted each other over the 12 days of Christmas gifts, items, and props from films in the Quentin Tarantino universe. It was a blast of a conversation, but my favorite part is where we were talking about what Tarantino meant back in the 90s versus what he means today in terms of relevance and appreciation, and how we can apply that mindset to our podcasts, how we are as podcasters. Do we burn out? Do we fade away? Do we want recognition, or do we want harsh, critical, constructive criticism? So yeah, great conversation with that, and please listen to that episode. Now, that's pretty much everything you're going to hear today, and I'm really excited about 2025. So do yourself a favor. Please like, review, subscribe, rate, review, not only my show, but all of my guests. You can find their links in the YouTube videos and in the podcast notes of each episode, whether you listen to it on Spotify, on Apple, or Amazon Music. Give us reviews, give us likes, give us follows, and stay tuned for what's happening in 2025. And with that, I say thank you very much, and I'll see you next year. All right, so this last part of my conversation is we're going to play a little game, and we're going to take a tally, and in that tally, we're going to determine what the best punk band name would be based off of phrases from this movie.
Okay.
So I got a list of dialogue and catchphrases from this film. We're going to do 1 through 10 and decide what is going to be the best punk band name based off of these phrases. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So band name number 1, Murder, Death, Kill.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be pack leader if it was number 9.
Well, see, I think it's a little bit more metal, but I'm still going to give it a 7. What about you, Chris?
No, I would give that a 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it'd be up there. I think.
All right. So we're giving a 9 too?
I might give that a 10.
A 10. Oh, shit. All right. All right. Number 2, Maniac Imminent.
Ooh. I think it's a little too overt. And I think it would be, I would give that a 3.
Giving it a 3. I'm giving it a 6. Al, what about you?
2.
A 2. All right. I don't think Maniac Imminent's going to win this one. Number 3, Enhance Your Calm.
Oh, that just makes me mad.
That's so perfect.
It is really perfect. Yeah. I'm gonna
Enhance
give
your
that.
calm.
I'm gonna give that an 8.
I'm giving it a 9.
Okay, 8 for me.
2 8s and a 9. All right. Enhance Your Calm. Doing pretty well. The next one, Muscle Bound Grotesque.
Ooh. 4.
I give that a 5.
A 4 and a 5. I'll give it a 5 as well. All right. This one is pretty good. Hall of Violence.
Yes. Oh my God. But wait a minute. That strikes me more as an album title than a band name.
Oh yeah, Hall of Violence
could be an
by
album
Murder,
for
Death, Kill.
That's even like poetic.
Right?
I feel like if I had a hall in a museum, that's what it would be called.
Okay.
Band name, I'm going to give that a 7.
I'm gonna give it a 7 too.
That's 7 for me too. 7 across the board on Hall of Violence. All right, next on the list, Simon Says Bleed.
Oh, fuck off.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, but Simon was really annoying me every time he said, Simon says this. I'm like, shut up. I'm going to give it a 2.
Simon
Okay.
Says Bleed. No, I'm going to give that. Also, I think it would make a better album name, but Simon Says Bleed, I would give
Like the sophomore release, right?
Yeah.
Their second album.
Exactly.
Okay.
Murder, Death, Kill plays the hits.
Yeah.
All right, so the next one on the list, No Kiss Kiss, No Bang Bang.
Ooh.
That's a sad song and a sad album.
And a sad
That's
band.
like,
Yeah. It's just sad
that's like a
songs.
Cure album or something, right?
Yeah.
Morrissey's new album, No Kiss Kiss, No Bang Bang. I'm giving that a 3.
One.
That's like an incel album. I'm going to give that a 1.
Okay, so this one's going to be difficult because this could be easily a G.G. Allen band name.
Okay.
Fluid Transfer.
Ooh.
Ooh, that does sound like a
That's a
album
really
name.
good. No, that would be a great band name.
Yeah, that is a good one. Oh,
I'm gonna have to give that one a 9.
I'm going to give it a 9.
I'm giving that one a 9 too. So that's 3 9s across the board.
All right.
All right. This one's pretty simple, maybe too simple. Be fucked.
I feel like I'd play that all the time.
That's my entrance music.
Yeah. That's just when I
Are we
wake up
saying
this morning.
that's side one, track one
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Muscle Bound Grotesque or Hall of Violence?
I like that a lot.
I think I'm going to give that a 6. I think it maybe is too on the nose.
I like it. I'm going
All
to
right.
give it an 8.
All right, I'm giving that one a 6 too. Okay, and this one is more for a joke. I think that this is more of like a ska band. The last one on the list is Let's Go Blow This Guy.
that would be a terrible punk band name. I would give that a 1.
That's just a third.
As a ska band, I'm giving it a 10. As a punk band, I'm giving it a 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
All right, and so that makes it a tie between Murder, Death, Kill and Fluid Transfer. Do we want to do like a sudden death between those two?
I think we should do a sudden
Yeah.
death. We got 3 voters, so there absolutely will be a winner
Yeah.
if each of us chooses. All right.
Okay,
I'm going to go with Fluid.
I'm going Fluid Transfer.
Yeah. And because I think you're right, Murder, Death, Kill would be a better metal name.
Right. What about you?
I agree with you guys.
Fluid Transfer is the new name of our punk band from this list of dialogue from Demolition Man. That's a great game. We should play that again with another movie. But this movie had so many good ones.
It
Like,
really
Yeah.
as I was taking my notes, I'm like, God damn, that's a great. This
I
every single one of
appreciate
these, with the
that you
exception.
made that into a
With the
game.
exception of No Kiss Kiss No Bang Bang, I think it's a great band name on almost all of these.
I think that would be a
All
good
right.
song name.
Yes. I still think it sounds like a Morrissey song, but whatever.
It could be.
What a fun conversation, guys. I love doing this again. And now comes the final question of the night. We've already done one. Now we're on the other one. Demolition Man, Judge Dredd. Who you got?
Remember on our last episode, I said I think I like Judge Dredd more than Demolition Man. I stand
I
by
do
my
remember.
words.
Really?
I do. I enjoyed Judge Dredd more. I think I liked a lot of aspects of Judge Dredd. It didn't like all gel for me, but I felt like there were things like here and there that I really liked. Like I liked those guys out in the wasteland. I liked the actors. I liked, Judge Dredd's like mentor. I liked his nemesis. Like I just didn't think they were all cast right, but I liked elements of it so much more. I was so annoyed watching Demolition Man. I felt like it borrowed so much from Judge Dredd. Like the end of the movie feels so similar. Like, okay, we just blew up society. Yay. Everybody's
Yay.
happy. Roll credits.
There's no leader.
There's no
Yay.
leader. There's no resolution. We should all be so happy. Why?
Right. Like fucking Otho's going to come and take over. Like, oh,
And Stallone again convicted for something he didn't really do and just paying the price. I'm like, this borrows so much. It feels like, I don't know. I
mean, it came first, but it's a very common tale. And then he did that movie Lockup too, so he just liked being the guy that was being blamed for shit he didn't do.
Do you think? Sorry, I'm derailing it there. But do you think
No,
it's
you're fine.
because? Do you think there's an element where people want to be in on something that they think is a conspiracy and be the first one? Like, if you can throw something out there and then it does become true, do you think there's an element of people want to be in on something and be the groundbreakers to try and uncover that.
I think that's part of it, yes. But I think the main thing of it is I think that people are so just bored with reality. Reality is boring.
Yeah.
So to create something that seems so fantastical to bring a little bit more of interests and relevance to someone's existence, I think that's why QAnon was so big here in the States, is that these were people that literally did not do anything outside of watch Fox News all the time and read about conspiracies and government corruption. And there's always been government corruption. But all of a sudden, like, this gave them something to talk about, and there were other people that they could find online to talk about it, and it just grew because that fantasy was more interesting than what was really going on in the reality. That's what I really think most of it is.
Yeah.
That's not to say that someone with influence and power and control can recognize that in people and then use that to manipulate larger groups of people. There's always going to be someone who can recognize an opportunity to do either good or bad. More than likely, it's going to be bad. And all that does is add fuel to the fire, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where I think about that.
Yeah.
So I think the doom mongering has really taken a step up in the last 20 years. You know, everything now is an end of days thing. I mean, I live in the state of Utah. The main religion here is the Latter-day Saints. Latter-day Saints. It's essentially a doomsday religion, right? It's a religion based on how to prepare yourself for the end of the world and the end of days. They paint a very happy, family-friendly picture on it, but it's in the goddamn name. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The world is ending. We got all these doomsday preppers. The industry of doomsday prepping here is huge. We've got army surplus stores up the ass. We've got people making dehydrated food buckets and making millions off of them. Is it profiting off of doom mongering? 100%. But they, for the most part, really, really believe it. Now, at the same time, I think that the elites of the church don't. I think they are just exploiting the willingness of its followers. That's why they're asking for all these tithings. They own billions and billions of dollars of stock that they don't share with its congregation. Like, it's kind of messed up. But if the Church of Jesus Christ can do that, who's to say that the Vatican can't do that? Who's to say that, you know, the financial institutions, BlackRock, all this stuff that people are talking about aren't doing that? And that's what can get someone really just deep into these conspiracies. So in the last 20 years, we've seen a few films that really are painting an interesting picture of what could possibly be the end of our existence as we know it. So one of the ones I think is really interesting was 28 Days Later, written by Alex Garland, directed by Danny Boyle, about a virus that turns us into essentially mindless zombies. We're not eating people, but it's a rage virus. It essentially is like a form of rabies. And if you bite someone or scratch someone, they get it too. And then society collapses and it's all about survival. Interesting concept. Doesn't seem too out there, especially with what we've seen of how, you know, government and public responses are, the fear mongering of it. The other one I think that's really interesting is Interstellar. Now, while it's mostly a sci-fi film about finding another planet for us, think about why. You know, it's the ecological thing again. And to me, the ecological fear is the one I'm most convinced is going to happen first. You know, yeah, there could be wars. I think that there is a very fine line where we know not to push it too far unless we got someone crazy like North Korea. But I think it's going to be ecological, in my opinion, that's going to wipe us out first. You know, we're going to see famines and dust bowls and crazy storms, and that's going to mess things up. So even though that's more of a science fiction outer space film, the reason why they're doing it is the one that's more convincing to me. And, you know, we haven't really talked about like how funny the movie actually is, because yes, it's a dark story about a dark event in history. And the songs aren't all necessarily whimsical. They might have whimsical themes and the musical score might be upbeat. But if you listen to the lyrics, they're really, really raw about the culture, about the discrimination of Latinos in this culture. But also, there is this thing that there is a lot of, I'm going to say, self-discrimination along some Latino communities. And I feel we experience it in this country today where it's like, you know, like the father and son relationship where it's like, I'm a hardworking Latin American who I have to prove more. I have to work twice as hard to prove myself to the people that run this city, and you're out being a hooligan. Like, what are you doing? Like, there's a self kind of discrimination amongst that too. But the humor involved in it really makes it feel better, especially in the club scenes where they're all just kind of talking shit to each other. For example, fucking Bertha is like one of my favorite characters in this movie. She's like the one girl that everyone's had in the club, and she's not the best looker, but they know at the end of the night, if they strike out, they're going home with Bertha. And I think it's Henry's friend that has one of the best lines about it, is like, she don't know the difference between being cool and coolo. And that just made me fucking die, because it's like, I know what that word means.
Dude, yeah, there's you know what? The generations have changed, but trust me, Bertha still exists.
Bertha
she is
still
alive and well in the Latino culture.
I think she's alive and well in every culture. She just has a different name for each one.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, in every Latin family, dude, we all know a Bertha.
I do like the fact that the 38th Street gang, their gang, is kind of like a melting pot, right? Because there aren't just Latinos in there. There are some Caucasian dudes. There's a white boy in there, but he's been raised in the culture. And I think we all know people like that. It's the same thing with like white guys been raised in black communities where, okay, the color of my skin, yeah, it's obvious, right? But my culture is this culture, and this is the culture that accepts me. I've known too many guys. It's also the same reason why guys get sucked into things like neo-Nazi groups and stuff like that, where they don't find a home in what they think their own community should be. So the community that adopts them is now their community. And sometimes they get shit on for that, but I also think it makes them stronger, and it makes them a little bit more loyal to that group. And if there's one thing that this film does portray about that gang, is they're not the most aggressive gang. They're probably not the most respected gang, but the sense of honor amongst themselves and loyalty and trust, it might make them the strongest gang in that area because of how much oppression they have, because they're so poor and they're jumbled and they're mixed up. Like, that brotherhood that you see throughout the movie after they get blamed for this and they're sitting in jail, and you see the cops trying to break one of them apart so they can sink the whole group. And they're like, no, man, these are my brothers. Like, I'm not flipping on anybody. Like, this is my gang. And that's another thing that I think is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And yeah, trust me, believe it or not, a lot of people, like, no, they really won't believe it that, yeah, you know, there's that white dude in there. No, yes, you know, being Mexican American, I can tell you, yes, they are those white boys hanging out with Mexicans that absolutely grew up with them. I mean, you're not going to see them kind of like when they were portrayed in Colors, more like it's actually very familiar, like I guess you could say like Christian Bale in Harsh Times, something like that. Yeah, they get wild like that. But yeah, absolutely, they are brought up, they are hanging out with the culture, and it's like, dude, they're absolutely one of us. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's that sense of honor, no matter what, and loyalty within each other. That's what keeps everybody together. And absolutely, they recognize that. And yeah, hey, once a Mexican mom takes you in, it doesn't matter whether you're black or white.
Right.
Yeah, your family.
Your family. Yeah, no, 100%. The first person you see on screen when this movie starts isn't Pamela Adlon.
No.
It's baby Seth Green.
Yes. So baby that, and because of the quality on the YouTube video, I wasn't actually certain.
Right, it didn't even,
because he was so little.
Yeah.
And his teeth were different because he was still growing into his face.
Is about him.
Yes, you think the movie's going to be about this kid.
What is he doing?
Going
He's got
around
a
the
wagon
neighborhood
full of little monkey and cymbal toys.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Why?
Well, at first, like, I just thought, oh, he's just like the little neighborhood hustler. But now that I've seen this movie 3 times, I'm like, is he a fucking wizard? Like,
right?
he's like a mystical shaman with a little radio flyer wagon going around selling people Native American trinkets.
Stuff?
I know.
And they have
Where
no
did he get it
parents.
from?
Him and his sister have no parents that you ever see.
Oh, I got so much to say about that later. But
well, there's lucky that there's any parents whatsoever.
I know it was.
Right.
I mean, we had to see the parent dynamic for her, and that was it.
Yeah.
For the main character.
Right, like
yeah,
none of the kids in this movie have parents. I think it's kind of an 80s trope though, right? Like
It
the
is,
parents are
totally.
always out of town
Right.
or they're
There's always
fucking
absent
dead.
parents. Yeah. They're living home alone.
Right?
Right.
They don't
Old
want,
stalking
social
style.
services to find out. Like, don't say anything. Mom's been dead upstairs. It's like a
Oh my
Gilbert Grape
God.
situation. We got to burn
Right?
the house down.
Or like it's just really the perfect example of, us Gen X, early millennials, where it's like we're fucking feral, right? Like our
Yeah.
parents were just gone and
We're running.
we're
You
running
just
around the
loose.
neighborhood. Right. Which kind of is the whole buildup to why Millie, played by Pamela Adlon, is having such a hard time as a teenager because she's the only person with parents in this fucking movie, and
They give a shit, yeah.
Like the mom, like really wants her to be girly, and mom is Patty Duke, and then dad, played by John Glover,
Oh my
is
God,
like,
this guy.
I
know.
fucking wish I had a boy all the time.
He's
I
like
know,
making,
he's
like,
over the
making
top.
Pretend in the
Yes,
driveway,
he's pretending
like, right
to
in
do
front of
catch with his
daughter.
son, and then he wants to fuck his wife while
impregnate his wife 14 years
14
later.
years apart. And then he says that
In
Millie
hopes.
can take care of the baby.
Are you insane, sir?
What?
Millie doesn't want to take care of this baby.
Mm-mm. She wants to be an
What
astronomer.
was he in where he was like the super bad guy? What was it?
He's
And
in
now-
lots of stuff. But do you
He's in
remember that
lots of stuff.
movie? Oh, the one that scared the shit out of me in the 80s is, remember when he's little Matthew Lawrence's dad and he can't get custody, so he fucking burns him in a hotel room?
Oh my God.
That happened
really
here.
happened.
That
really
happened here.
Yeah, that was here.
based on a true story where we live. And that kid,
Yeah.
we used to see him
Yes.
around town. He was a skateboarder.
He was a
Uh-huh.
skateboarder. Yeah, they have like a whole segment at the end of that movie, and little Matthew Lawrence played him in the movie. I think it's called like
Oh,
David
I
Gets
never
Burnt or
saw
something.
that.
Yes.
I never
Yeah,
saw
he
that,
plays
but I saw
Psycho
that
Dad.
Oh
kid.
no, but I know that story for sure.
Yep,
Oh
for
my
sure, for
God.
sure. We heard
If
all
we ever
about
did
that
like
as
a
kids.
traumatic TV movie episode, that was one of them, because I think I was like 8 or 9 when it came out, and I was just like, Dad, you love me, right?
Wow. Wow.
Oh, I remember
You're not gonna
hearing
burn
about
me in a
that
hotel
story.
room, right?
Because I would see him on the, like he did like the whole talk show circuit
Yes,
and all
yeah.
of those
Yeah.
things. I
Oh,
feel
like
like he
Donahue
passed
and shit,
away.
yeah.
I think he did. I think in his 20s he
not
passed
super
away.
long ago, like a few years ago. I feel like he.
I think he was in. I think it was a while ago because time,
well,
the way
because
time
I
moves,
don't know.
It seems like a few years ago, but it was like
could be any time between the last year to last 10 years for me
Right.
to
And
be
it'd
like
be like, oh,
recently.
yeah.
But
know,
I remember
recently.
that guy from Gremlins 2 and Scrooge. Those are
Yeah.
the ones that like
Mhm.
pop into my mind right away for him.
Horace Leachman, who I remember as the secretary at the end of the Muppet movie, who has the allergy to animals and lets all the Muppets in because she's just, they dandered her to death, right?
You're not gonna say Frau Brugge?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, there we go.
So, but anyway, I mean, she's delightful. And Hansel, who's stuck in a cage and being fattened up, he doesn't really resist too much. I guess if you're in a cage, you might as well just keep eating, right?
Well, the witch had a really good system of keeping both children hostage in a different way.
Yeah,
Because
I like that one.
both were threatened in a different way, and so one of them couldn't pull anything because she could hypnotize Gretel, or she could, force more food into Hansel or stab him with a stick or something, and so neither of them really had a plan.
I think like she's working Gretel to death, and Gretel only gets to rest when Hansel eats.
Yes.
Right, I think that's it. And so her
Capitalism,
plan, though,
baby.
her plan's a weird one. She obviously wants to eat the kids, but she's going to bake them into gingerbread men. But I think, as we see, all the kids that she has baked into gingerbread men, they're just in a holding pattern in the front yard.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I don't care.
Yeah, she
I
hasn't
don't
eaten any
care.
kids yet.
Plot hole, I don't care. It didn't hurt me at all.
That's fine. I mean, that doesn't make it less enjoyable. I'm just
Maybe she's licking the children.
She goes out there and just licks them.
Yeah.
In which case she's just eating gingerbread. But by the way, her house looks delicious. It looks wonderfully delicious. After they turn they turn it on her, and Gretel? They don't push her into the oven. That's how the fairy tale goes. But Gretel gets her magic wand, and Gretel, who I guess had been paying attention,
And learning
studying
spells, yeah.
Yeah, learning the spell. She immediately casts a spell on the witch, and what can she do? So she becomes a gingerbread witch.
That's one thing
And-
about wands that always bugged me. As long as you rhyme, you can do anything. But the important thing is you rhyme. Yeah.
You just got to hold it and rhyme.
Well,
yeah.
you have to believe it too. You have to believe the spell. That's like other things I've seen. It's like it doesn't work unless you have faith in it. I think vampires are the same thing with like crucifixes. It doesn't work unless you have faith in the crucifix, right?
Right. Right.
And
Very
this
good.
is the same way. That wand's not going to work unless you have faith. But dude, you've left out the part that it's not really like you said, they don't push her in the oven. It's like they tempura her. Like they put her on a
Like
gingerbread
that's the
tempura,
they
yeah.
dip her in batter and then they toss her in the oven.
This was
which
the
is
one thing
essentially
about
how
the movie I
it is.
liked, because that was the one thing that was unexpected. It's like, okay, we have to make sure we batter the witch before we cook her. That's very important. We have to follow the recipe. We're following rules here, and I can respect the kids for that.
The character of Valentino, I don't really believe that Nureyev was supposed to be portraying Valentino the way that he was actually portrayed in the pictures. This is Ken Russell's version, right? This is Ken Russell's imagining of this character, and people talked about the accent and people talked about, was he really that flamboyant? Was he really that graceful? Did he do all this stuff? Was he really a gigolo? All these things fit into Ken Russell's wheelhouse. So when he is directing this guy and he is playing this character this way, it doesn't matter if it's historically accurate because I am bought into this version that Ken Russell is presenting. And again, everything with him is almost operatic. The makeup on people, the theatricality of these things. The dude loves the waltz. Like Ken Russell puts a waltz in everything.
Yes, he does.
Puts it in a goddamn boxing match in this one. He's got dozens of couples doing a waltz around the boxing ring. Like this is, I'm going to say like peak Russell when it comes to the projection, right, of the fantasy through a character. And because Valentino was a silent film star, it's almost like we can do whatever we want with him in his expositional life, because really what the public knew is like what you said, what was either on the screen or in the tabloids. Everything else is open for interpretation.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Valentino was such a big star, or any of the stars of that era, because even though now people do project things that they think are there, or they maybe see in stars and everything, the frenzy for the stars in that era was at another level, because there was no defining aspect to how they talked unless you heard them personally, or maybe at an event. Some people they would have heard on television. No, that wasn't around yet. Right. So see, I was testing you on that. I think couldn't hear it in the newspapers. So that I think is also a feature of the film, sort of showing that era, and also in how incredibly lucrative it was to be in the pictures back then.
Well, because it was bottlenecked, right? The industry was incredibly bottlenecked. There were no unions. There was no representation. Essentially, you were owned by a studio or you were owned by another studio. Singing in the Rain, perfect example of that too. Just a little bit more family friendly. I think
just ever so slightly.
Ever so slightly. I love the women in this movie. No, I talked about women.
Same here.
Earlier in the Mahler conversation and Ken Russell films in general, but when you go back and think about this film is literally told by the women in his life. The exposition is set by the women in his life, and we go from story to story through their eyes. Again, that goes to the open interpretation of what we're really seeing, because that's how the story's told. And it's being told in different ways by the different women that were there and the Valentino that they dealt with. So as the film takes its different energies, right? The whimsical, the campy to the more serious, Natasha's character, Michelle Phillips' character, she had to deal with more of the business aspect than the other ones did. So therefore, the film follows a more stationary energy and not so fantastical, because she had to deal with all of the the studio dealings and the control. And
well, she wanted to. I think that's the key thing about her character. She wanted to, and she was a domineering, rather, some would say, presence in his life. And I think that's best seen when they do the walkout during the after a powder puff is thrown on him while they're shooting. I don't know, but they show the title of the movie. I can't remember, but he's all decked out. He looks like Amadeus.
He looks like the dancing cavalier in Singing in the Rain.
Thank you. That's right. That's exactly it. And so someone basically impugns his masculinity by dropping a powder puff on him from the catwalk. And there's a work stoppage. And then no one comes out to admit that they were the one who did it. And so that there was a walkout. But that walkout is led by Natasha. And all of the demands, some of which help him, some of which harm him, are always led by Natasha, and she comes close to ruining his career a couple times.
Yeah, the control aspect, 100%. Goodness, Diane, the one thing I have to say about that role is that you spend almost half the movie silent. It's a silent performance. You're doing so much face acting. You're doing so much body acting that when you finally do have your French rant, it's like that moment in Seven where it's like, oh, what's in the box? Like, it surprises us as an audience where she speaks and she's got this beautiful French accent, but that whole time up until that moment where you speak, it's all about your facial performance. And to me, that's just like one of the best parts of that movie is just your reactions to what everyone's doing.
I so appreciate that. It reminds me also of Last American Virgin as Karen. Because part of the movie is like, I don't talk at all. And then all of a sudden, boom, I've got this personality. Or I'm talking. Which is so interesting because being deaf on one ear, there were a couple of things. Being deaf on one ear, I do pay more attention to how people use their body, their facial expressions. And I remember being a kid and watching TV with the sound off. I mean, just because usually people are talking or something, and I would watch actors. I would watch their facial expressions. I would ask myself, do I believe them? What are they doing without sound that makes me believe them? So I was always studying that as a kid. I mean, it fascinated me, people's body movements and eyes and expressions, and the bigness and also the subtleness. So that is, and also I took dance. So that's probably maybe very connected to my body and be able to, I used to do ballet. So I think I had a connection that all came together in my performances. Everything I studied, I took singing lessons. And as a child, I guess I got, and then, so singing, you're listening to tones and how words are pronounced. And that gets me much more connected to dialects. So I'm going to tell you, as an actor and somebody who's done indies, it was just very important the way I was raised and how I was able to, all I can tell you is genuine inquisitiveness. As my parents didn't do this. It was my general and deep interest in the psychology, in the movement, and the voice and the center of the character that got me to continue. And Monique was a joy to play because she was the nicest character I've ever played. She was the role model.
Yeah, no, and everyone wanted Monique. That's what I always say about John Cusack movies of the 80s and even the 90s. The joke is always getting rained on because, the girl broke his heart. But in Better Off Dead, I mean, it's a quirky comedy, but it speaks so true to the teenage male experience where, like, all of us have had a Beth and all of us have wanted a Monique to save us from ourselves. And we don't always get that. And that's what I think the beauty of that movie is that you do save him from himself. But the compliment I can pay you, the best that I can in my verbiage, is when I talked about your grin, never to me has a grin said so much than in your performance in Better Off Dead, because every response you have that's a facial movement to anyone's activity is through a grin, and the grins are always different. So even when Ricky's discussing you give him a grin, like almost like not let him down, but it's a very indifferent grin. It's not a welcoming come hither grin. So the way that you communicate all of these ideas and emotions through grinning, it's just one of my favorite things about that movie. It's an amazing performance.
Can I just say that I hope I really, really, really appreciate that. And I hope that other actors will realize, sometimes the something you have no idea that you're portraying becomes something you're known for, or something that means something to someone.
Right.
So I just want to say, no one's ever said that about my smile. Sometimes people say they like my eyes or something, but I love this. Thank you. You're touching my heart.
Oh.
That's like, because I think that with my face, I get to transfer happiness to people. So good. Then that's the good thing to be able to do. So
there's something about the idea where a story or a novel can be deemed by, I want to say, the studios. I think the court of public and cinematic appreciators' opinion is different, calling a project unfilmable. We've all heard about these books, these stories, these adaptations that will never get made. And some do get made. Some are really great. And some, I'm not going to say are unfilmable because they were filmed, but they're just received differently. I'd say anytime you're dealing with Vonnegut, you do have to face the fact that there are going to be critics out there who will say that it is unfilmable. You cannot capture the energy or the magic that was on the page and make it cinematic. What's your opinion on that? And how did you approach this adaptation when that kind of ideas are out there in the zeitgeist?
You speak the truth, my friend. Actually, a side note, and that you're a journalist, you might be able to do this. I've been told over the years, since the book was first published in the early 70s, that countless directors and writers and producers have optioned it, some with rather prominent track records. It'd be interesting to know who took a crack at it. I was just a young, long-haired kid. I had hair then. Right after Nashville, we'd finished, and somebody brought the book to Altman and said it was unfilmable, even then. And he had writers trying to crack it. Nobody seemed to be able to. And I was about to write something for him, Buffalo Bill and the Indians, which was also an unfilmable stage play. I guess that's my little corner of activities, unfilmable things. Anyway, he said, I need a script. I can't move forward or even try to move forward without a script, and no one seems to be able to deal with it. Can you? And I need one now. And his marching orders, I can hear him say it, just don't follow the book. And so if you've read the book, Vonnegut is, I think he even said it was a birthday present to himself. Vonnegut is not only the author and the narrator at times, his alter ego is in the book, his alias is in the book. And he, instead of sometimes articulating or writing further, he'll come up with one of his original drawings to make the point or to summarize. And I don't remember the conversation with Bob so much, but I remember thinking, I don't want to make a biography of Vonnegut. It would be unfair to everybody. So I'm just going to follow the characters and try and reduce it to the story. And fill it in as I see it. But the main thing of that book for me personally was it was a reflection of the times.
When the book was written and when this film was made, I still feel, and I was a younger guy back then, that the idea was we were all kind of walking around trying to project the idea that we were all sane and that we were all normal. Like normalcy was what everyone strived for. And the 80s and 90s idea of normalcy was, like you said, success-driven and ego-driven and clout-driven. And then here we are, 25 years after the film came out, where I feel like normalcy is almost kind of a dirty word. Everyone wants to be individualistic, which I'm all for individualism. But also what that does mean is that what would have been considered insanity or madness back then is somewhat normalized. And then there's this weird kind of underlying idea that we want to return to normalcy. Like that's what I hear all the time is like, when are we going to return to normalcy, to status quo? And if you go back and look at all the decades before me, I mean, I'm only 43, but I can go back and look at films from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Normalcy is different generation by generation. Yet as a species, we hold on to this idea that normalcy never changes. And I think that the way these characters are portrayed, and what an amazing cast. We'll get to that in a second. But I agree with you 100% where madness is easier for the people in this movie. And that's the direction that they choose. And I think that was missed when it came out, maybe by critics and by, I don't know, analysts of the film. But I think it comes out better now because there's so many of us that are just on the brink of, hey, when is the comet going to come? When are the aliens going to come? I'm tired of what we consider normal now. Madness seems easier. And I feel that this film reflects that. Podcasts might be like the downfall of some of our favorite filmmakers because it gives them a chance to speak without thinking, right?
Without filtering.
Yeah. When they're doing the press circuit, they pretty much have exactly what they're going to say to these guys who are asking them questions that are pretty much give me questions. And then you get into a long format conversation with somebody and you just start talking shit. And before you know it, you've unraveled the web of mystery around you. And now you have to live up to that. And it's forever. It's on YouTube and it's on Spotify forever. So yeah, I get a kick out of seeing people in the industry who I respect. I get a kick out of them watching them squirm because they've just said too much and now they have to feel like they live up to it.
I mean, you can be a fan, but you also have to have a critical eye and be willing to say, you know what, that sucks, or you know what, they're wrong, or you know what, it's not as good as it thinks. Because you'll have people reach out to you and tell you your show sucks. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or you'll get that 2 for a rating. You're like, just give me the 1. I prefer the 1.
Right.
Just tell me I suck. Don't give me a 2. A 2 is almost a kick to the balls. Just give me the 1. Or, I can handle the 1. I either want the 5 or the 1. I want you to think I suck or I'm great. I don't want this, like your parents being like, that's really nice. You did a really good job. I fucking hate
It's an adequate podcast. You're doing okay.
Yes. It's such a punch in the face. He says a lot. And look, maybe he enjoys it, or maybe he just doesn't realize that if he says something, people are going to jump on it. If he tells you what he thinks about a movie, they jump on it, right? And he's well-versed in movies. There's no doubt. He's forgotten more than I remember. And that's a fact, because I used to think that I knew quite a bit. And then I heard him talk. I was like, I don't know shit. It's kind of like when you're playing a sport, you're playing a high school sport, and then you go to college, you think, in high school, you're the man, you're the best. And you go to college, you realize, God damn, I'm not even close to what these guys are. It's that kind of like
I should be handing these dudes towels is what I should be doing.
Exactly. So, I mean, he's got people, his contemporaries like Ridley Scott, tell him to shut the fuck up and just keep making movies.
Yeah, someone needs to tell Ridley Scott to shut the fuck up and stop making movies.
There's some of that. There's definitely some of that. But I give Ridley credit. He's making these big epics and he's knocking them out one after another. And like Tarantino takes forever, which he's a writer. So we understand it's going to take longer for Tarantino to make a movie than David Fincher, who's just going to get a script, have it polished, pre-produce it, and then go ahead and film it. He can do it a lot faster.
Yeah.
However, who I call Britain Tarantino, Guy Ritchie's been able to knock out 2 a year almost.
That doesn't mean they're good, though. Yeah.
I mean, are they on the same level as Tarantino's? No, but his last few have been pretty decent.
Yeah.
He's actually been putting out some pretty good films.
No, I agree with that. I think one of the things that I want to finish off this brief conversation before we jump into the meat of this episode is that I think people just have to learn how to be accepting of the evolution of a filmmaker, whether it's good or bad, right? Like, I feel Coppola is in that point where no matter how much he shits the bed in the last 20 years, it's never going to erase what he gave us in the 70s. Same with Scorsese. I mean, Scorsese, I feel, has kept a pretty constant track record, but there's also a safety to it, right? He's making films that are good for him to make, and that's okay. I don't care if a filmmaker decides to stay in his safe zone. I feel like Ridley Scott has stayed too safe. He's really just kind of figured out what he likes to do, and he doesn't push the envelope anymore. But that's okay. He pushed the envelope enough in the 70s and 80s that it changed the whole generation of filmmaking behind it, especially in science fiction. So give the dude a break. I feel bad when I don't get that that rush from a Ridley Scott film anymore. It does feel kind of just complacent. I don't hate him for it. It just makes me feel like I'm going to never see a real good Ridley Scott film again, but it makes me appreciate the good ones even more. If you're looking for a show dedicated to obscure film, cult classics, and hidden gems, well then look no further than the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast. Cringe-worthiness aside, I think still holds up for all the wrong reasons because it's strategic cringiness. I mean, not to get on a political soapbox, but I feel like everything has to be either very safe or very pandering these days. When in the 80s, no one gave a damn. Like, let's scare the shit out of them. It'll be fun. This movie's not as bad as other movies I've covered. It's totally insane. The cocaine is in every frame, but there's something kind of fun about it. I said peanut butter solution. Nicole said, oh, what about that movie where Bobby Hill grows a dick? Subscribe today on your favorite pod platform, on YouTube, or visit us at thecultworthy.com. The Cultworthy Cinema Podcast.